Sweet. So, night school.
Night school.
I just read The Stoic Toolkit, Fighting Anxiety with Ancient Philosophy by Chris Roberts. My favorite thing about this book is how concise it is. And, you know, when we're reading books and we know we're going to present them on the podcast, we're always taking notes as we go. And you can tell that some books you want to take a note every page, and some books you can take a note like every 5 to 10 pages or whatever. At least that's how I function. This was a book that I was taking notes on like every other page. I was always taking notes on this book. He did not waste any space, you know, because it's only a 90-page book, and if he might be tempted to like stretch it to 200, so it looks like more of a real publishable book or whatever. Right. But it only needed to be 90 pages, and it was only 90 pages. It was perfect. There's no fat on this book, and I think that's very stoic of him. I think it's really in the heart of Stoicism to not do any more than is necessary.
Sure. Yeah. So, be brief. Get to the point.
Really good. Yeah. Really good book. Thank you very much, Chris, for writing this book. So, this is the first time that I've done an episode that's like, how many tips on this or that. The reason I'm doing it that way is I don't have a strong grasp on what defines Stoicism. I don't know if there is a strong grasp on it. I just know I don't have it. The last episode, I'm doing a series on anxiety right now, not like a formal series, but that's what I'm reading about right now. And in the last episode, I talked about a psychotherapeutic philosophy, and I had a decent enough grasp of the philosophy to summarize the whole thing and just describe what the philosophy behind that type of therapy is. And I don't have that with Stoicism. Stoicism seems to me to be characterized by embracing responsibility, by clearly acknowledging what's yours and what isn't, what you control and what you don't, living simply. There's a little bit of Zen in there, maybe, you know, being present in the moment, not focusing on the past or future, embracing life as it comes, embracing suffering rather than running from or avoiding suffering. So those themes are common in Stoicism. I don't know what defines it exactly. And
we'd done an episode. We were talking a little bit about this before
we did the Marcus. You read Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, we did Marcus Aurelius's Meditations book, which is, he's kind of considered the father of Stoicism to most people, as a philosophy at least.
Right. Not Stoicism. Like the inventor, but like the main character of it, right?
Yeah, the one that people, if anybody gets interested in Stoicism and they Google it, like they're going to end up with Marcus Aurelius first. A lot of modern Stoicism is based on his work, and I know that like the term Stoicism comes from Zeno's original teachings from Greece that Marcus Aurelius carried on later. But the word Stoic also now is in the zeitgeist, and you know there's no clear control over what that word necessarily means. Most people, when they think of it, it means like someone who is cool in the face of danger, or like someone who's courageous, something like that. Right. And so maybe he's just referring here more generally to, he's just using the word stoic, but
he does reference all of those greats, and I don't have any. Okay. I'm going to share a bunch of tidbits from this book, and I don't have the names of each person that said this tidbit and that tidbit. So read it yourself if you're curious. Like, what did Marcus Aurelius say, and what did other Stoic dudes say in this book? It seemed like there was 4 or 5 that were his favorites. But I was only worried about plucking my favorite insights out of this book that can help people deal with anxiety and then sharing them in a concise way. So that's all this is. I'm trimming the fat too, you know, in the way that I'm presenting his book. So
love it. Sounds like a good way to handle it.
So the last episode, my first like podcast on anxiety, this kind of series I'm doing, I talked about how in AEDP they have a change triangle, and you want to go from the base of the triangle to the point. And at the base of the triangle is a bunch of vague feelings that you can't even define. And at the top of the triangle is clear consciousness, calm, courageous, confident consciousness. Well, I said that I was going to explain that I did find an insight about the triangle that was interesting, but I never said what it was. Well, what it was I realized that, and I was getting here. Remember, I told you there's 10,000 Raleighs. There's 10,000 versions of you in the past that are stuck. They're not all on the same page. Where I was trying to go with that, and I got lost in something else, was at the base of the triangle, there are many. At the top of the triangle, there is one. So when you move up the change triangle, you're going from being a divided and unintegrated person to a whole and integrated person. So to go back and cover that point that I lost, and then to relate that to Stoicism, one of the main things that is going to make you a less anxious person is to be a more decisive person who trusts himself more, who is more whole. Because the more you have to wonder how you're going to handle a situation that comes up, the more anxious you're going to be. Mm-hmm. But if all your attention is on each situation that arises, and you totally trust your future self to deal with situations that arise, and you are always the same dude, regardless of the circumstance, then you're going to be a lot less anxious than if sometimes you handle things well and sometimes you don't. And you don't know what you're going to do, let alone what the environment around you is going to do. So working from being a divided person to a unified person, a whole person, a decisive person, a confident, clear person is the goal. If we want to live a lifestyle that is not marked by incessant anxiety. So I'm going to go through a bunch of tips. I think it's going to be 26. We might come up with a couple more. We'll see. Okay. First tip for dealing with anxiety, Stoicism perspective. If you're preparing for a performance or something that's making you nervous, focus on how you're going to approach it rather than how people are going to receive it. A lot of performers think about whether or not the crowd is going to like what they do, and that makes them anxious, when they should be putting all that attention into how they're going to perform. The more you focus on the aspects of something that you control rather than the aspects that you don't control, the less anxious you're going to be, and the more certain you're going to feel of what you're going to do. Because at least everything that you can control, you can predict.
Right.
Because you've put all of your attention into doing it the way that you plan to do it. But if you put your energy, if you stake your peace on how other people are going to handle it, then there's nothing you can even do to ease that.
Right.
So choose to care how you're going to do and not how other people are going to receive what you do.
Totally.
Number 2, appreciate anxiety for the fact that it can call your attention back into the present moment. Sometimes your anxiety is going to arise because you're not paying enough attention to what's going on in front of you, and it's going to go off like an alarm to remind you. It's going to say, dude, you're on a date, and you're thinking about your mom. You're thinking about your dad. You're thinking about work tomorrow. You're on a date. You're going to blow this date. And that alarm's going off. So instead of going, turn off alarm, go, oh, thank you, alarm. My bad. I meant to give you my undivided attention. I meant not to be thinking about the fact that I pissed off my boss yesterday instead of being on a date. So the second tip is appreciate anxiety for the fact that it can remind you to bring your attention back into the present moment. Number 3, think more analytically. So what this means is base your map of reality more on facts and less on opinions. That's what it means to approach life more analytically. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at a situation or an event and you're anxious about it, think, could I think about this more analytically? Are there a couple of opinions that I'm using to map this situation that I could drop and I could stop considering those part of my map? And are there a couple of facts I'm ignoring that I could add to the map? And that will make your maps of reality more accurate. So when I say map, it's like you went to an event yesterday. You're not sure if it went well. You're not sure if you presented yourself in a way that made you likable. Now you're wondering about it and sweating about it, literally, the next day. Get it? Yeah. So I'm sorry, I need to explain the inside joke. He sweats more than me. So what are the opinions on the situation that are your map of the situation, and in this sense is your description of how the event went. Okay, so now analyze your description of how the event went more analytically. Think, well, what are 2 opinions? Okay, in my opinion, that person probably didn't like me. Okay, well, how could I replace that with a fact? They broke the conversation off early because they got a phone call. Okay, so I'm going to drop that opinion and have a fact. Instead of they probably didn't like me because they walked away while we were talking, I have a couple of facts instead. It's possible that they liked me, possible that they didn't. Those are both facts. They took a phone call and walked away while we were talking. That's a fact also. Yeah. That's less anxiety inducing than basing your map off of the opinions. So think more analytically. That's right. That's the third tip.
Yeah, because you could end up coming up with what you think the reason for it is, and then you just start fitting every other piece of data around that, right, hoping to make yourself correct.
Right. Then you're going to look for all the reasons that your opinion that person didn't like you is accurate. And go, well, they don't like my friend and I'm like my friend, so they probably didn't like me. Right. Well, now you're 2 opinions deep. Yeah. So just keep taking steps back and be a little more analytical. It won't get rid of all the anxiety. It'll make your map more accurate, and that will make you less anxious. Yeah. Number 4, don't contemplate the future too much. There's something that Eckhart Tolle talks about in The Power of Now, and something that comes up in Stoicism too. It's curiously difficult to find reasons to be anxious in the present moment, but very easy to find reasons to be anxious about the future. So don't think about the future so much that you're anxious about what's going to happen in the future. If you feel that happening, if you feel I'm anxious, well, are you thinking about the future so much that it's creating anxiety for you now? Well, that's not productive. Like, it's common sense. Like, the future might suck. Okay. So the fact that the future might suck is an idea that exists in your head.
Yeah.
That idea existing in your head and you choosing to dwell on it is making your present moment suck.
Totally. Yeah.
So the future might suck, but at least the present won't if you let it suck in the future instead of now. So don't think about the future too much.
And the future may suck, but when you get to the future, the version of you that is in the future will have much more data to analyze about how it sucks and what to do about it that you don't have right now.
Right.
So you are
and a later tip will say that version of you will be at least as competent as you.
Hopefully.
More competent, likely.
I hope so. I mean, that's not always true, but I hope.
Right. But the more time you spend in the present moment, the more confident you'll be, reassuring yourself that you'll be able to deal with that in the future.
Totally.
Because one of the main reasons you wouldn't be able to deal with that in the future is that version of you in the future isn't living in that present moment that exists in the future.
Right.
It's worrying about something else.
Yeah.
So the more you're in the moment, the more you can be like, hey, I'm in the moment now. I'm going to be in the moment when that happens. I'll address it.
Yeah.
It might be a disaster, but I'm not going to experience that disaster now.
Totally.
Don't think about the future too much. Number 6, don't reassure your anxiety if it shouldn't be reassured. So we talked in the last episode about reassuring all feelings. That was about reassuring anger, reassuring sadness, reassuring joy. If you're feeling anxious and you have no reason to be feeling anxious, don't lie to yourself and tell yourself that you have a valid reason to be anxious. Remind yourself that you don't have a valid reason to be anxious. So there's the next episode that I do on anxiety is going to be about rewire your anxious brain, and it breaks down the difference between anxiety that manifests in the amygdala and anxiety that manifests in the cortex. Well, if you're dealing with feelings, if you're dealing with an amygdala phenomenon, then what you want to do is hear, understand, and validate. But if you're dealing with a cortex phenomenon, if you're simply dealing with the idea that you are anxious, then you shouldn't tell yourself that logically you have a valid reason to be anxious if you don't. If you feel anxious right now and there's no reason to be anxious here, you should correct yourself and be logical and analytical and remind yourself that you don't have a reason to be anxious. Feelings don't need to be validated until they're stored up and neglected. And, even present feelings need to be validated, but thoughts and ideas don't need to be validated. That's what I'm getting at. Cortex stuff, so I apologize. It's not just that they're stored up. Present feelings can be validated. Present thoughts and ideas should not be validated if they're wrong. So you can tell yourself, oh, you're anxious, that's okay, but then don't lie. You should be anxious. Don't validate that. Correct that and make it more rational.
Yeah.
And that's a safe thing to do with yourself because you know the difference, and that's a risky thing to do to other people. If your girlfriend comes to you and says she's anxious and you respond by saying you don't rationally have a reason to be anxious, you're treading in dangerous territory, because if she's already in amygdala anxiety, then all you're doing is kicking something that's asking for comfort out the door.
Yeah.
But if she's in cortex anxiety and she's saying, should I be anxious about this presentation? And you confidently and clearly and compassionately say, no, because you're fully prepared and you've done everything you can to prepare. You shouldn't be anxious. She'll go, yeah, you're right. Because we're speaking logically. If we're speaking emotionally, a different game. So, but Stoics don't care about emotions. So,
it does seem like there is sort of a line of like, try to feel as little emotion as possible, which may be that, like we talked about before, it may be that like if you just feel your emotions fully,
as
that you
barely
feel them.
Feel them as you go.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. Yeah.
Right.
But there is a couple parts in this book where I'm like, dude, emotions are not, I don't know who hurt you, but like he says, he's talking about a tip in the future, in just a couple down, will say don't dwell on the past. I'll just skip forward to it. Number 9, don't dwell on the past. What he says is, don't spend any time being angry or sad. And I'm like, because we just talked in the last book about how necessary it is to embrace those emotions. But what he was trying to say, and it's not a book about emotions, so we got to put these books in there and keep them in the place that they're in. Yeah. This is not a book about how to process your emotions. This is a book about how to live a lifestyle that will result in less anxiety occurring. This is not about how to treat persistent emotional problems that create anxiety. So He's saying don't feel sadness or anger. And what he means is he says don't dwell on the past because you can't change it. Don't wish that the past had been different than it was. Don't spend time being angry or sad. So what he means is don't be angry or sad because you wish things could be different that aren't going to be different because they're outside of your control. Mm-hmm. Don't choose to indulge in emotions that are the result of the things that are outside of your control, because that's a game that could go on forever. Mm-hmm. But if something that is within your control happens, if a dog that you're responsible for gets hit by a car, be sad. But then don't be sad later about the fact that you didn't prevent your dog from getting hit by a car when it was outside of your control. So they're just trying to keep emotions in their rightful place.
Yeah.
And to their credit, they do seem a little anti-emotion, but to their credit, when you keep emotions in their rightful place, they don't occur nearly as much as when you let them run rampant in your imagination.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 6 was reassure. Don't reassure anxiety when it shouldn't be reassured. We skipped 7 and 8 briefly and mentioned 9, don't dwell on the past. Number 7, focus more on the things that... So what I wrote down was the noble spirit and the degenerate spirit. So let me start there. What it describes that the noble spirit, and this is a quote from some philosopher, right? Mm-hmm. The noble spirit aims to improve himself so that he has a better relationship to the world around him. And the degenerate spirit wishes that the world around him worked differently so that he had a better relationship to it. So the 7th tip is basically... think about how you can improve yourself, and don't wish that the world around you was different. Mm-hmm. Because the wishing that the world around you is different, I mean, I could insult the character, of people that work like that and say, they're victimizing, they don't take responsibility. But if you are one of those people, who does that all the time and you're listening, mm-hmm. let me just explain it this way. There's not something like immoral about your character that you blame the world instead of change yourself. But let me just say, if you choose to be upset about circumstances that occur in the world that you have no control over, then there is no end to your anxiety or your suffering. Yeah. There's no end to your suffering.
Yeah, there's plenty you could find.
You can find it forever.
Yeah.
So I'm just warning you, if you choose to be upset about the way that the world is, then you have opened yourself up to endless suffering. That is a gateway to hell. That is a gateway to a place where you have endless suffering. If you choose to be upset about the ways that you are currently not conducting yourself in the ideal manner, and then you choose to use that as fuel to conduct yourself differently, you will experience less and less suffering as time goes on. Mm-hmm. And that's leading to a good place. So behave in a way that leads to a good place, not in a way that leads to an endlessly bad place.
Yeah.
The noble spirit and the degenerate spirit.
Yeah.
Number 8. And so number 8 is pointing out, so when you worry about things that you can't control, you revoke your rights to the things that you can control. So when we're talking about the things you control and the things that you don't, you got to remind yourself that you have a finite amount of energy that can be put into anything.
Yeah.
So it's not just that when you worry about things outside of your control, you open yourself up to endless suffering. It's also that you take the things that you could actually control and you sign them away to the universe. Say, right. I don't want that. Hey, here's something that you actually have control over. You're saying, no, thank you. I'd like to suffer.
My over here now.
I'm suffering instead. Thank you very much for giving me something I could control, universe. But no, all my finite attention and energy is on something I have no control over, and I'm suffering as a result of it. So when you worry about things you can't control, you revoke your rights to the things that you can. So number 10, this is cool because we like to get more esoteric. The 10th Stoic insight on anxiety is the concept of cosmic consolation. So cosmic consolation occurs when you take blaming to its absolute, what do you call that? Absolute conclusion, to its, so like
logical conclusion?
Logical conclusion. Yeah. Thank you. Take the concept of blame to its logical conclusion, and cosmic consolation occurs. So let me give an example.
Okay.
I'm mad at you for the fact that you were rude to me yesterday, but then I think about him like, he was rude to me yesterday because him and Sarah were fighting that day. And then I go, okay, well, then it was really Sarah's fault. But then, okay, well, why was Sarah upset? Sarah was actually upset because Sean did something, blah, blah, blah. And then I go, well, why was Sean upset? It's like, well, Sean's stressed because they're having a baby. And then I go, okay, well, they're having a baby. So whose fault is it that they're having a baby? Because that's whoever's that fault, that would be the rest of the stuff. Well, if every time you were going to blame somebody for something, you drew blame all the way to its logical conclusion, every single thing that anybody is responsible for traces back to the Big Bang.
Right. Yeah.
And it's gone. There's no blame anymore. So every time you blame somebody, and this actually, I saw this in a Tony Robbins documentary. Somebody was,
I am not your guru.
Yeah. He's blaming some lady for some lady is blaming her ex-husband for all the problems that he has caused with her and their daughter that they had together.
Yeah, I remember
he says,
that one.
you're not blaming him enough. You need to blame him for creating such a beautiful daughter. You need to blame him. And he starts going into all of the fact that you can't wipe that dude off the face of the earth, because that would wipe your whole family and your history and your daughter off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
So instead of blaming him for the things that he did wrong, blame him for everything he ever did right and wrong at the same time. And what do you end up at? Acceptance. Stoic acceptance.
Yeah.
So that's number 10, cosmic constellation. Nothing's anybody's fault. It all goes back to the Big Bang. You can't trace it to any origin.
Right.
Number 11. This is coming off an idea called the hedonic treadmill. This is a Stoic idea. The hedonic treadmill is a lifestyle that constantly tries to satisfy itself and its desires. Mm-hmm. So here's their tip for ending the hedonic treadmill. Work as hard to end desire as you do to fulfill your desires.
Okay.
What if every day, instead of working so hard to fulfill your desires, that you take overtime because you don't have enough money for bills, but the reason you don't have enough money for bills is because you bought a coffee every day.
Right.
So instead of working that hard to just give yourself a coffee every day, take the coffee out and put that much energy into becoming a person who has shed himself of foolish desires. So what's harder, fasting from coffee or telling your landlord you don't have the rent because you bought 90 coffees? What's actually harder? Actually harder? Fast from the coffee. Give it up. That's working to end desire instead of working to fulfill desires. And it's a better investment of your energy that has a greater payoff. Yeah. So that's number 11. End of the hedonic treadmill. Number 12. Don't be attached to possessions because possessions are outside of your control. And attaching them to you makes you a slave to external events and therefore vulnerable constantly to anxiety. So what if you're anxious right now because you're not sure if you're going to have the weed whacker that you like tomorrow or the weed whacker that you hate? You have one weed whacker that you use at work where it constantly launches rocks at you. It doesn't have a guard on it. It only starts half the time. You have to choke it every time you start it, and it ends up making your whole day a mess. Yeah. And then there's another weed whacker. Whoever gets to work earlier grabs the good one. And there's a good one that makes your day easy. It blows by. You listen to podcasts. You don't even notice you're working. Yeah. You're thinking right now, like, depending on the whatever that I get tomorrow, like my day might suck. My day might be good. And you're ruining your evening right now thinking about that. That's going to happen tomorrow. True. So don't see an object right here and then take your peace and set it on that object. My peace tomorrow will be determined by, I declare my peace tomorrow will be determined by the weed whacker. Now the weed whacker, you're a slave to the weed whacker now. How many objects like that are you a slave to that if they don't go the right way or work correctly, then your peace is ruined? Fun fact, Dogface, the guy who got famous for riding a skateboard, drinking a cranberry juice, and listening to Fleetwood Mac, you know where he was going?
To work because his truck broke down.
His truck broke down. Yeah. So he made a video so cool that the cranberry company bought him a new truck full of cranberry juice. Yeah. So his peace was not determined by his truck. His truck broke down, but he kept his peace, and he was rewarded as a result of conducting himself that way. And
like not being attached to things. Like I think it many times in my life I've gotten like too attached to the things I own to the point where like I make sure I still have them and like get really upset if something like things have gotten stolen from me before, and I'll like freak out about it. I'll get really upset about it and like drop everything to try and fix that when like it's not that big a deal. It's a thing.
If it got stolen, you're probably partially anxious because this is not just anxiety. The podcast is about anxiety, but this example is to apply Stoicism to that in two ways. You're upset about the fact that a possession that you wanted is no longer in your possession and your peace was dependent on that possession. But you're also upset about the fact that people whose behavior you can't control didn't go the way that it would have gone if you controlled it. That's not a reasonable reason to be upset either. Someone else conducted himself in a way that I wish he wouldn't have. That's not a reason to be anxious.
It's not a good one.
Right. It's not a logical one, because if a Stoic in that situation would go, I know exactly what to do. I'm going to ask everybody if they know who stole it. I'm going to do a police report if that's my thing, or I'm just going to ask around if that's my thing. So I know how I'm going to approach it, and I'm confident in my approach. And then the object, like, I'm going to go without that for a couple days. I actually have a friend I could borrow one from. Could I afford to buy a new one? Yeah, pretty soon. So you're confident in how to react to the situation, and so you feel peace. And you're like, I can't control the fact that somebody stole it. People are going to steal things. Like, I'm grateful that I have people who come over to my house and bring acquaintances, but one natural con of that is something's going to get stolen once in a while because people are weird. So you're not confident in the external events. You're confident in the way you're responding to them, and so you feel peace in the valley, in the storm. So 13 and 14 are kind of a pair. So if you notice that you're handing your peace over to externals, there's two things that you can check. Is there a problem in your judgments, or is there a problem in your desires? Those two terms, judgments and desires, came up a lot in this book because he's putting forth the philosophy that if you're suffering with anxiety, then either actions is a third one that'll come up in a second. But to go with these two for now, your judgments on the situation are wrong, or your desires in the situation are not in their proper place. So like in the situation where your video game got stolen, so your judgment of the situation is that you're better off being angry in response to the situation because that evokes some sort of justice when it really doesn't evoke any justice. It actually only makes you suffer more. So your judgment of how you should react to the situation is wrong. And maybe if you thought about it more carefully, your judgment is wrong because you were drunk and you loaned it to your friend, or you end up coming up with something else that it was a snap reaction. And you, like, if you're suffering, ask yourself, is there something wrong with the way I'm judging the situation? Or and judgment also applies to determining how you should respond to it. And then is there something wrong in my desires? Do I desire something so much that it has control over me? Is that the way that I want to live my life? Do I want to live my life so that when something happens to something I own, something happens to me? Or do I want to be separate from the things that I own? So if you're suffering with anxiety, question your judgments, question your desires, and we'll get to actions in a second. 15, don't seek approval. You can't control approval. So same thing, you can't control the weed whacker tomorrow. Well, and actually, in that example, you can, because you could show up early and get it, but then he could always show up earlier. So it's like, you can think about an object, you're like, well, it's outside of my control, so I shouldn't worry about it because that's investing my peace in something that I can't control, and that makes me less in control of myself. And then you could think, well, but I can control it. I can control whether or not I get a coffee tomorrow. But then on a practical level, you can, but on a realistic level, on a totally logical, honest level, you can't. You don't know if your car is going to be broken down.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know if the coffee shop was shut down by honest employees because there was black mold in it and you can't get a coffee. Like, you don't know. So you can think, I'll be able to control this, but you really won't when we're being completely logical.
Yeah, you don't know if the good weed whacker's broken now or the bad weed whacker's fixed now. And
so we lie to ourselves and say, no, I've thought everything through. No, you never have. It doesn't exist. Same thing with cosmic constellation. When you take it to its logical conclusion, you realize that nothing is anyone's fault. And so there's really no reason to feel blame.
Right.
And there's, if you really think about that, if you meditate on that realization, you'll feel high for a moment. It's like a freedom. Nothing's anyone's fault. It all goes back to whatever the origin of the universe is, which we're all still guessing about. So same thing with when you take the idea that you can't control anything to its logical conclusion. It gives you a freedom, because the fact that you can't control anything ultimately means that there's nothing ultimately that it's reasonable to worry about.
Right. It's a very deterministic view. A determinism would be like the best way to kind of illustrate that idea, or like the best word for that. Just the idea that like everything is determined. Like, nothing is nobody's fault because everything is based on outside factors that if you go back far enough to the Big Bang.
Not at all. It's not a determinism thing at all.
It isn't?
Because like, and you're referring to determinism as opposed to free will, right?
Yes.
Well, even if...
Which I kind of think, my opinion is that they're both basically true. That like both things are kind of
it's
true.
like a yin and yang thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, or like, you look at it from a different perspective and you can see that there's free will, and you look at it from another perspective and you can see it as a plan. Well, no, but even with free will, with the blame thing, it's not that it was determined to happen. It's that if you blame me for something I did to you, then you would have to then blame whatever caused me to do that to you, even if I chose to. Oh,
I see what you're saying.
Because we choose within the framework of a certain defined multiple choice reality. But even if we don't choose multiple choice, even if it's fill in the blank and you can do whatever you want, something inspired me or evoked within me the inclination to act the way that I acted. And so are you going to go blame that? Yeah. Well, then blame whatever inspired that or caused that, however you want to think about it. And you'll still end up all the way back at God. Yeah. So with the blame thing, it's like, I think the determinism is a clearer way to see it. But I think if you take it a couple more steps with free will, you get to the same thing anyway. Oh, I freely chose to do that because of all of the things that, that made me. No, now I just went deterministic again.
It's hard not to. It's hard not to have that mixed in there.
I know. It is. Now I'm thinking about it in an extra moment. If I have absolute free will to do anything that I want, and I choose to do something terrible to you, can you blame me for it? I suppose you can.
Yeah, but I mean,
and then
I can also then blame whatever made you the person that made the choice
what
they
made
did.
me. Yeah, that's how you end up back at the origin of the universe again, and what made me and gave me the ability to have free will in the first place, because I have free will. But did I give myself free will? Not likely. Possible, but either way, I think if you keep stepping back, you still get back to a vague origin that can't be defined. But then once you get to, let's take the free will thing a step further. So let's say that there's a God that created me to have free will and created you to have free will. So now you could blame that God for giving me the free will to do something awful, but to use the Tony Robbins approach, then you would have to simultaneously blame that God for everything good and bad ever done as a result of free will, in which your blame would still dissolve. Yeah. So the blame game and the guessing game of what's going to happen, neither ultimately work. And Stoicism can free you from that. So 15 was don't seek approval because you can't control other people's opinions. Therefore, to stake your peace on them is to give away your peace. 16. Set aside a few days to do some extreme fasting, like only eat chicken and rice and only wear extremely plain clothes. We wear pretty plain clothes anyway, but pick a couple of shirts that aren't your favorite but that are wearable, and only wear those shirts and only eat chicken and rice. The point of doing this is that you'll realize that you're not nearly as dependent as you think on all of the things that you stake your peace on every morning. So it's like, if you're a coffee person, right? You go to the coffee stand and you get the coffee and you think that the joy that you feel is contained in the coffee. When the coffee is handed to you, it's like a little pocket of joy, and it comes into your car and all the joy spills out of the coffee, and now the joy's in your mouth while you drink the coffee, and now your day is good. No, you just chose to feel joy when you received the coffee. Like you already feel more awake when you got the thing in your damn hand and before you even drink it. A lot of it is just these mind games that you play with yourself where you go, and then if the coffee's not available, you choose to suffer because that's the other side of the coin, and you like that game where you go, oh, yeah, now the coffee, this is my joy. This is my little cup of joy. The joy is not in the cup. Sure. Neither is the suffering. Yeah. But if you still like playing that game, that's great. Like, we obviously choose to play those dualistic games. We, on some level, this is kind of a Judeo-Christian thing, but if it is an illusion that you get joy and suffering from the cup of coffee or lack of cup of coffee, then you probably chose to enter into that illusion because it's more fun than not, And most of the time it turns out good and you take the bad with it. And if that's your thing, then get the coffee. That's great. But if you want to use Stoicism to live a life that's free of anxiety, then go without the coffee for a week. Realize that you feel the same amount of joy anyway.
Yeah.
And now you don't need the coffee anymore. And now you're in a position where your anxiety is less dependent on things you can't control, which means that you're going to feel less anxiety in the long run.
Sure.
Some of us have 30 things every day on which our anxiety is on which our peace is dependent.
Yeah.
And if one of those 30 things, if our laundry isn't 100% folded, if our friends don't trip into any guitars, if we get our coffee, if we get our favorite weed whacker, if we get to work on time, if nobody says anything rude to us, if all 30 of these things happen, then I'll feel peace. One of them doesn't. Like, my day was hard because one of the things I chose to stake my peace on didn't happen the way that I wanted, and now I'm choosing to suffer as a result of it. You can cut all that out, or most of it. Go without a lot of things on an extreme level. Sleep on the floor instead of your bed. You'll still sleep fine.
Yeah.
But if somebody ruined your bed, you'd be like, I don't have a bed. Damn it. My night sucks. I've got no bed.
One. Yeah.
But if you slept on the floor on purpose, you'd be fine. You would sleep fine.
Now the bed has no power over you.
Now the bed doesn't have any power. So if you do that on purpose, then you're getting ahead of it. So 17, don't have an idle mind. So there's several religious and philosophical texts that talk about the fact that an idle mind is a bad thing. But
idle mind is the devil's playground.
Yeah, an idle mind is the devil's playground. What does that mean? Well, if we overlay the devil idea over the chaos idea, and we're looking at multiple religious ideas here, then we can see that an idle mind is a place where chaos can emerge. So what would it mean to have an ordered mind? Well, to skip to number 18, have a meaningful goal that you're striving for. An ordered mind thinks in service of a meaningful goal. So if you have a meaningful goal in your life, like it really matters to you that you have a positive relationship with Sarah. So when you have nothing else to do, you think about how to make your relationship with Sarah better. So Sarah's going to get home from work in 30 minutes. You have a meaningful goal. Have a happy relationship with my girlfriend. Now you don't have an idle mind. You have a mind in service to an order or in service to a goal.
Sure.
And so you're sitting there excitedly imagining nice things you could do for your girlfriend, and you're having a good time, and your thinking is ordered, and it's not anxious. It's hopeful and excited. So an idle mind, the devil's playground, the place where chaos can easily emerge, is a mind that doesn't have a goal. So you're sitting there thinking, and you end up thinking about what you would do if a mugger broke in. And that's the devil. That's chaos. That's nonsense. A mugger's not going to break in. You didn't have any goal, so you ended up thinking about something stupid. Or, I mean, if your kid says, I want to be on the computer for an hour unsupervised because I'm reading about a research project for school that I'm really excited about, and I'm a little late on it because my peers, have already done this work, but I'm doing this or that, and you can't watch them on the computer, but you know what they're doing. They have a goal. You're like, feel comfortable with that. What if your kid says, I want to be on the computer for an hour? I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll tell you exactly what you're going to do if you get on the computer with no goal. You're going to do the first thing that your lizard brain wants to do on a computer. It is not going to be something constructive.
Yeah.
Whatever your brain defaults to doing when you don't have a goal is self-gratification. It's self-gratifying. It's immediate gratification if you have no goal. So 17, don't have an idle mind. 18, strive toward a meaningful goal. Those are partners, because if you have something that you're working towards, you, instead of feeling anxious, you'll know what to do with your spare time. Work towards your goal. If you don't have a goal,
to go back to 17 a little bit, like to put it in context of like the times that we're in right now, an idle mind doesn't really lead to thinking of like worrying about things that are unnecessary. An idle mind now really leads to scrolling on your phone. Like that's true. That's almost always what it is now, which is also, I think, a bad thing.
No, it's just destructive.
Meaningless scrolling. Horrible. You're going to end up on TikTok. You're going to end up on Instagram. You're going to end up wherever, just like looking at shit to entertain yourself. But it's like, it's junk food. It's never something good for you.
And so when you're scrolling on social media, you are at the mercy of your affects and emotions being guided by whatever happens to come up. And so one piece of content for 5 seconds could make you sad, and the next piece of content for 5 seconds could make you anxious, and the next one could be gross. Yeah. And then the next one can make you feel hopeful, and the next one can make you feel motivated, and the next one can make you feel horny. and the next one can make you feel nervous, and the next one can make you pissed off because something in the world is happening that you wish wasn't. And you're at the mercy of whatever comes by. And that is a great example of the devil's playground, because it's just chaos happening to you. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. You have no control over it.
Yeah.
If you're using your phone intentionally for a meaningful goal, then you're not going to be scrolling on social media. Like you're going to subscribe to Thinker, Thinkr. Every time you get on your phone and you get tempted to scroll, go see if you have an email from Thinker. It's a free newsletter, thinker.com/free newsletter. Every 2 or 3 days, they'll email you like a 10-minute summary of an interesting book. It'll be different stuff: economics, philosophy, math, English, current events. They're all interesting. They're all good. They're all concise. They take 15 minutes. Instead of scrolling, see if you have a new email from Thinker and read that. Do something that your intentional mind would approve of you doing.
Yeah.
Not something that your own intentional and conscious mind would be like, why did you just watch a compilation of girls in bikinis falling off of cliffs? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And it was only the one girl in the bikini. The rest of it was
the rest of it was dudes crashing into tables at parties.
It was just the thumbnail.
That's just the thumbnail. And then or you're on social media and you're looking up your exes and people you don't like just to see. What do you mean just to see?
Yeah.
What are you going to get there? What are your intentions even? You don't even know what they are because you have an idle mind, because you have a mind with no goal. You don't even know what you're doing. It's probably not good. If you just roll the dice, you're probably not going to stumble into something that gives you direction and
you're giving up
purpose and
control.
meaning.
You're giving yourself to like the things you can't control. You're like,
right.
Give me a feeling, and like the last, like you're talking about, like this one made me angry, this one made me horny, this one made me sad. Whichever like the last one you watched is going to end up like determining the direction that you go from there typically.
Yeah, so it winds you up. Like, what are those stupid toys where you wind it up and then it just flips out on the table and they crash into each other?
I don't know, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Freaking. Okay. So, but one of those, a Beyblade. So it Beyblades you.
A Beyblade. Okay.
Yeah. So the endless scrolling Beyblades you off, and whatever the last feeling that you felt, that's the direction that you're going to spin when it spins you off of it, and you're going to just be vaguely frustrated for the next hour and feel like the state of the world is in disarray because you watched a 5-second TikTok video about some political issue that you have a problem with. It's like, just so if you have a content creator that you like and that makes you feel decent when you watch it, and you watch that content creator, they might do something that you don't like, so you are in a sense handing your steering wheel over to another individual. But that's better than going in public and taking your steering wheel and letting go of it and say, anybody take this. Anybody that wants to take this can take this. That's a bad idea. Would you do that with your wallet at the bus stop, on the bus? Would you do that with your wallet at school? Would you just hand it out and say, anybody who wants this can have this? That's not a good idea. Don't do that with your attention.
Yeah.
So 19, when you're thinking about who you want to be pro-social. This is something I was really excited to read. I didn't know this was a part of Stoicism. A lot of philosophical and religious systems these days have become individualistic, about being the best individual that you can be, as if you yourself are removed from all of the people who exist around you, which you're not. It's like Jordan Peterson, can't skip an episode.
Got him.
He talked about you need hundreds of bees to make a colony. What are you going to do with 6 bees? What are you going to do with 6 bees? What are you going to do with one person? One person? What exactly is the future of one person? What are you going to do with one individual human? Nothing. So why would you base who you are off of what you want to be as an individual person? That's an illusion. Be pro-social. Instead of thinking about what kind of individual you want to be, think about what kind of brother you want to be. Think about what kind of boyfriend you want to be. Think about what kind of uncle you want to be. Think about what kind of son you want to be. Think about what kind of coworker you want to be.
Yeah. Think about the roles that you want to fill in the world, because you cannot fill them all.
No.
You can't do the whole thing.
Right. So maybe you'd stop pretending that you're going to end up being a superhero if you realize that what you want to be is a good uncle, brother, coworker, and boyfriend. You're like, I'm going to start with those 4. Every day I'll ask myself, am I a good uncle, a good boyfriend, good brother, good coworker? Then that will give you so much satisfaction. You'll let go of all the nonsense illusions in your head about all the things that you kind of want to be. You know, because you actually have like 500 fantasies floating around in your head about all the things that you aspire to.
Yeah.
And most of them are nonsense and you don't even want. But if you pick like 4 simple ones that are immediate roles that give you meaning with your friends and your family who are right in front of you, then that will give you so much fulfillment. You'll forget about all those nonsense fantasies. So when you think about the kind of person you want to be, this is tip 19, be pro-social. Think about the roles you're going to fulfill.
Yeah.
20, when you make a plan, add the fact that the plan is not going to go as planned into the plan. That's an addendum to every plan. So don't ever make a plan and then say, if this goes well, I'll feel good. If this goes the way I think it will, I'll feel good. If this goes another way, I'll feel bad. Because one of the problems with doing that, this is a little off topic, but it's a tip from a hostage negotiator for the FBI. He says, never be so sure of what you want that you wouldn't take something better. So some people are so attached to their plans and what they're asking that something better emerges and all they see is that it wasn't what they planned. So you got to be open-minded and open-hearted in every situation, knowing that, okay, here's what I hope will happen, but it's not going to go that way. Yeah. That's tip 20. Every time you make a plan, that's an addendum to the plan.
Yeah. Know that you do not have all the data.
Yeah. And P.S., it's not going to go like this. That's in every plan. And then a lot of the times the plans will change and they'll end up better. Or the plans will change and they'll just end up different. And it's neutral. And there's no reason to stress about it. You just go, oh, it's a red chair. Didn't think about it. Thought it was going to be a blue chair. Cool. Like, glad to be here.
Yeah. Or
it's a little worse, but you expected that was a possibility. So you go, oh, yeah, I figured this might happen. This is not quite what I wanted. Here we are. But it's a lot easier to go through that little aha moment. Oh, this isn't what I expected before a situation than it is in a situation. You walk in. I walked in an interview at the City of Richmond one time. I had been talking to exclusively women to set up the interview. It was like HR ladies who were setting it up. So I thought that it was going to be the women who I had been communicating with interviewing me. And then I walked into the interview and it was all men. It was like 5 men. And I got anxious. And then I had to think about it later. Like, why was I anxious? Like, something about the way I mentally prepared for the interview was based on interacting with women.
Right.
And then when I realized
feminine energy.
I mean, it's a different game to convince a woman or convince a man to hire you. There's plenty of overlap. There's not 2 separate things. I'm not saying they're different species or anything, but generally
there's different ways that you communicate with men or women.
Yeah. And there's different ways that they'll be impressed. Like I realized all of a sudden, like, no charm is going to work here. Like any charm here would be extremely obnoxious. And I thought that being a likable and warm person was going to be my main approach. And now I'm putting that on the back burner and I'm bringing forth the approach of being very practical about the fact that I know how to do this job and am a decent employee. Like, and a little bit more rational. That shouldn't have thrown me off because before the interview, I should have gone, I don't know what's going to be in there when I walk in instead of making assumptions. So if I had that addendum to my plan, I think I'm going to walk in. It's going to be the couple HR ladies, so-and-so and so-and-so. Before you walk into an interview, you even picture in your head what you think the conference room is going to look like. You don't know if they're going to interview you in the lobby or on a bench outside or in their office or a conference room. So sometimes you walk into a situation and you immediately get anxiety. Well, and the next time you experience that, try asking yourself, am I feeling this anxiety because I made an unconscious assumption about what this was even going to look like?
Right.
You walk into a dinner.
I set this in the KID interview room in my head.
Right. The last situation. Last time you went to a dinner party, it was on a porch. Now it's in the living room. So you walk in, you're like, ooh. Like, where's the porch? Like, what porch? The porch you made up? So that's an addendum to every plan. Tip 20. Every plan has an addendum. This is not going to go the way I planned. 21. We already referenced this. Your future self is as competent as you are, especially if you're present in that moment. So be present in this moment and trust that you'll be able to handle it when you get there. Yeah. If anything, you'll have a little more information there than you did now. So that's 21.
That version of you will have a better understanding of how to deal with this.
He'll have more data at least. He'll at least have more data and experience. He'll have at least 10 more XP and at least he'll be there. Yeah. So you're not going to figure it out now if you can't figure it out then. But we already talked about that earlier. So 22. We actually already mentioned this one too, because all these ideas are so interconnected. Yeah. if bad things are around the corner, don't suffer before you have to. So like, let's say that your father is in the hospital, right? To use a serious example, our father is in the hospital. So you could feel anxious about the fact that he might die and he might live, and that would be a strong source of anxiety. But I'm not going to say a valid reason to feel anxiety, because you could see it that as I will either feel a lot of peace and relief, or I will feel a lot of sadness, and either way, that is what I will feel.
Yeah.
And it is not wise to avoid that and say, I'm stoic, so I will be unsad in the face of tragedy. That's ignorant.
Yeah.
But to say, I will be very, very sad if and when that happens. But I'm not going to be sad now, because if I'm sad now and it ends up happening, I felt extra sadness for no reason. Yeah. And I felt the wrong kind of sadness. And if I'm sad now and it doesn't happen, then all I did was like mess up the vibe of the situation by feeling sadness that didn't need to be felt, making him more nervous. Because, my family members seem sad. Do they think I'm going to die? Am I going to die? There's a million reasons that feeling an emotion before you need to feel it is counterproductive. Yeah. So that's 22. Even if bad things are around the corner, why suffer before we have to? 23, related. Acknowledge, constantly remind yourself how incompetently you predict the future. You're so bad at it. Yeah. Like with the interview example, do you really think that you're going to be able to guess with any accuracy what the room is going to look like? No. Is there any chance you're going to be right at all? Mm-hmm. So like if you constantly remind yourself how incompetent you are at guessing the future, you'll do it less and you'll torture yourself less with your bad guesses. 24, externals like money are merely tools, the ball in the game, not the goal. So this is about putting externals in their proper place. The point of going and playing football with your friends is to enjoy doing something with your friends. But in the moment, you pretend that the goal is to get a touchdown. So the goal is to get a touchdown, and their goal is to get a touchdown or prevent touchdowns and vice versa. But the meta goal is for everybody to have a good time with their friends. So what if the football went flat and everybody just got miserable as soon as the football got flat? Is that how anybody would react? That 20 full-grown men just get miserable because a football went flat? Or would everybody instantly remind themselves of the meta goal, which is to have a good time together? And if they were a functioning group of adults, figure out something else to do with their time. Like, we could easily just turn this into capture the flag. My hat is the flag. Your shoe is the flag. Go. Yeah. Same teams. Or somebody go get a football. And that's kind of a different example. But like, so when it comes to money, so we might make money off this podcast, but if we don't make money off this podcast, we're not going to be miserable because we have money in its proper place. So the primary reason to do this is to bond as brothers, to bond as friends with Evan, to encourage each other to read, to spread good ideas to other people, hopefully encourage other people to read. Yeah. We have the proper goals. And then secondarily, it's like, it'd be a sweet bonus, if some money came along with it. But the game that we're playing is not fundamentally based on making the money. Right. A lot of people are playing their games as if the fundamental goal is something that it really shouldn't be. Like they feel like they're failing at life if they're not making money. It's like, put that in its proper place. Yeah. Why do you want money? So you can feel comfortable, so you can feel happy. You could be comfortable and happy with less money. So they lied to themselves 10 years ago and said that they'll never be comfortable, happy, content, and fulfilled if they don't make this amount of money. And now they're convincing themselves that their peace is really tied up in that. But it only is because they decided that it is. And they could just put externals like money in their proper place and say, those are tools in the game, but those are not the real goals of the game. Right. And the real goal of the game is something much deeper and much more difficult to disrupt with externals like money. So stake yourself on that. And whatever that is, it depends on your own personal, moral, religious, philosophical views. Like, what's the real game? Yeah. I just gave an example. What's the real game of this podcast? If something happened in this podcast that prevented us from reading books and having a good time together, that would be devastating. Yeah. But that game is so deep that it's not likely for anyone to be able to disrupt it.
Yeah.
Like, what if we lost this studio and got another one and another one and another one and another one? And eventually we were doing the podcast with our cell phones and we were reading magazines. Like, it's like we're still winning the game.
Yeah.
Despite dropping down 20 levels of some smaller game that wasn't even the game. So we don't care.
Right.
So what's the ultimate game, you know? And that's where you get into people's religious views. What's the real goal of life?
That's
so,
hard to say.
25. I think this is the last one. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Remind yourself of that. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Mm-hmm. If you're suffering, is it in your imagination or is it in your immediate reality? A lot of people would say, no, it's in my immediate reality. In my immediate reality, I didn't get my coffee. Well, if I don't get my coffee, you know, okay.
You don't even want to talk to me about my coffee.
Okay, so I see the sign on your desk, and it's really quirky, and it's wine o'clock or coffee o'clock, and there's no in between. But listen,
That's
wine.
So stupid. I've never seen that one.
The wine. I've never seen that one either.
It's really good.
The wine.
People would buy that.
I was just at Goodwill. I just impulse bought 30 books at Goodwill. Dude, Dang. The philosophy and religion section at the Veterans, if you're watching this, you're not from the Tri-Cities, just turn it off. I already gave you the 25th tip. You suffer in imagination. So on Columbia Center Boulevard, there's a Veterans thrift store. I don't know what that means. It benefits them or something. The religion and philosophy section is crazy. I found Huston Smith and Andrew Weil. They're both part of the original Harvard Psychedelic Four.
Found Elaine, with like Ramdas and Timothy Keller or Timothy O'Leary.
They're the other two. Yeah. Found Elaine Pagels. I found Thich Nhat Hanh. I found Krishnamurti, one of those famous old Hindu gurus.
Okay.
Found Ravi Zacharias. I found Richard Tarnas, Passion of the Western Mind by Richard Tarnas.
Oh, no way.
So many good books.
Is it horribly long?
Yeah, it's fat, dude.
Yeah,
it's fat.
I figured.
He's written 2 books ever. Both were revolutionary. Both were groundbreaking.
15 years of his life.
And both take exactly as long to read.
Yeah.
So why was I talking about that? Okay, because that's what reminded me of the wine sign. Because I saw a wine sign because I was shopping at Goodwill.
It's a horrible idea, but it would sell so much.
There's
it's either coffee o'clock or wine o'clock. There is no in between.
That's a hit. That's not a real sign. I just wrote that right here, and it's a hit.
Okay.
So
verbal trademark.
If you have that mindset that if I don't have coffee or wine, I'm miserable, then you might say, I'm suffering in my immediate reality because in my immediate reality, I'm being deprived of the 2 things that my peace depends on, or my joy depends on, or whatever you want to call it. But what you experience as reality is really your imagination overlaid over your immediate experience that's actually happening. So you say, what's happening is because I didn't get my coffee, I'm miserable. No, what's happening in real reality is you told yourself that if you didn't get a coffee, you'd be miserable. And now you didn't get a coffee, and now you've decided to be miserable. That's the real reality. Or the real reality is you do feel miserable that you didn't get your coffee because you're having physical withdrawal symptoms because you didn't get the sugar that you've been giving your body. Caffeine too, but sugar more with a lot of those drinks. And you could easily go get that sugar and caffeine from another source, but it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be your coffee. So you're just attached to some little event that you created as an illusion in your head. The event was an illusion. You created the illusion in your head that you wouldn't be happy if you didn't get it. And so what you think is your immediate reality is really your imagination. And this, something that Hillary Hendel said in the book that I covered in the last episode was that what you really experience is your past traumas overlaid over your immediate reality. That's what you're experiencing. You're not experiencing your immediate reality. You're experiencing your past traumas overlaid over your immediate reality. You're seeing your immediate reality through a bunch of filters that you're not conscious of. And so,
lenses.
So when I say this 25, we suffer more in imagination than reality. I'm also saying that much of what you consider immediate reality is really just a bunch of filters that you've constructed that need to be deconstructed over time. And so Stoicism doesn't describe how to do that deconstruction process. The last book in the last episode does. That's the 25 Insights on Anxiety from the Stoic Toolkit by Chris Roberts. Thank you, Chris, so much for this book.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot of it comes down to control what you can control. Don't worry about the things that you can't control. It's the Serenity Prayer.
It's the Serenity Prayer. You could put you can
that.
call it a control prayer. The Serenity Prayer, for those who don't know, it's really popular in recovery communities. People who are trying not to be addicted to drugs anymore will go, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And what these Stoics are saying is, when you care about the things that you can't control and you neglect the things that you can control and you don't have the wisdom to tell the two apart, you will suffer in anxiety constantly. So if you're suffering with constant anxiety, that's worth asking yourself. That might not be the cause. You might have a chemical imbalance. You might have a million other things. But for a lot of people, this is going to be the unlock. And that's why I'm reading so many different books about anxiety, is that so many different things are going to be the unlock for somebody. It's like, oh, I'm mad at my dad and I think I'm anxious around male coworkers who remind me of my dad. I need to deal with that anger. Or no, it's an issue of the frames with which I'm seeing the world, which I have the control to adjust. That's what I need to do. And I really like the way this worked out. Hillary Hendel's was all about amygdala manifesting anxiety. The Stoic Toolkit was all about cortex manifesting anxiety. The next book is about how to put those two different kinds of anxieties in their individual places. Wow. So that turned out perfect. And
because that means that like one of these books is like courage to change the things you can. One of these books is serenity to accept the things you cannot change, and that the third book is sort of.
I didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah.
Woo! That's sick, dude. That's sick. So next up, Rewire Your Anxious Brain by somebody. I'll know their name in the next episode.
Yeah, I bet.
You got anything else for this?
No.
I feel great. Night school.
Night school.